little did I know that he was preparing me for something that was coming on my way. But anyway, what I'm going to share with you today is a paper that was born out of my master's thesis. So I was doing my master's at the University of Cape Town from 2016 up to 2017. So the fieldwork on which this paper is based was conducted in Giani. For those who don't know Giani, it's a very small town that is in the northeastern south side of South Africa in Limpopo province. It's a small town that is very close to the border of Zimbabwe and also the border of Mozambique. So when I started thinking about my master's thesis, my focus was on pregnant women. I was much more focused on pregnant women who are migrants in South Africa. The reason I focused on Giani is that it's a neglected area, a marginalized area, which has not been given much attention as far as research is concerned. So I thought maybe I could do something about pregnant women who are denied healthcare access in Giani. But when I entered the field, it was a different situation. It was a different scenario because I didn't find a lot of pregnant women. So in that scenario, that did not mean that I had to stop doing my research, but rather I had to focus on women who had children who were under the age of 6. So I was focusing on both pregnant women and women who have got children under the age of 6. And of course, other women who were key figures who became, key informants. So yeah, I had to do my thesis up until I graduated. But when I graduated, I just thought, no, this particular chapter, which was converted to this paper that we are speaking to today, was very important because it has got issues that had to do with what was obtaining in Guyana and what is still obtaining in Zimbabwe. So that dual sitting of the ideas was something that made me and moved me to convert this particular chapter of my master's thesis into a book. So this is just a brief background of how I came about with this paper. It's a chapter from my master's thesis, in short. So let me try to share my screen, and I hope you can clearly see my screen.
Yeah, we can see now. It's very clear.
All right. So just a brief background about Giani. Giani was formed in around 1960 by the apartheid government as the capital of what was called the Gazangulu Bandustan. Even up to now, there's a place called Gazabif, which came as a result of this Gazangulu name. So for those who know Giani, there is a place called Gazabif, which does, mainly they deal with cattle farming. So it was the administrative center of the Tsonga people, which later was called the Tsonga people's homeland. So Guyana already from the beginning was a marginalized and racialized capital economy. Normally, and right now, I think predominantly it's a rural economy, and the main livelihoods is just small scale farming, cattle ranching and subsistence farming. But mainly the issue is about labor migration that I'm going to be touching on in this discussion. But however, is in recent years, Guyana has been transforming. Yeah, it has gained a lot of geopolitical significance in that, there's retail booming, and Guyana is transforming into a very key trading center, where there are chain shopping centers, that chain stores and shopping centers or malls that are being built. So the issue of Guyana being Guyana developing is drawn the attention of a lot of migrants. And Guyana particularly emerges as a getaway town for most migrants from neighboring countries like Zimbabwe, because it's easy for people to just cross into South Africa, then settle in Guyana before they proceed to other cities like Johannesburg, Pretoria, Cape Town, among others. So it's also easy for people from Mozambique, migrants from Mozambique, to cross into Guyana. Some people, they cross and settle for longer, and some also they will just use it as a transit stop, where they just stop in order for them to work a little bit to find money for them to travel further into South Africa. But the idea of me speaking about Guyana and its proximity to Zimbabwe and Mozambique, it's not just about the proximity, but that proximity is very important in the way in which Zimbabwean migrants maintain their health and define illness. So keeping in touch with their home country is very important whenever they are defining and illness, and also when they are defining health. So it is important to note that migrants who come into Guyana, especially Zimbabwean migrants, they face a lot of challenges in accessing health services, despite them being accommodated in the South African health policies. For example, Section 27 of South Africa denotes that pregnant women and the children under the age of 6, regardless of nationality, they're entitled to free health care in government hospitals. But this is not the case when you go to Guyana. You can find that people in small positions of power, like the security guards at the gates, they would ask one for a passport, whereas a passport is not a requirement for pregnant women and children at the age of 6. So this is particularly the reason I had to focus on pregnant women and also women with children that are under 6. So this study, I had to focus on the Karanga migrant women who are in Guyana. The Karanga, they are predominantly a subset of the Shona-speaking people from Zimbabwe. They are predominantly in Masvingo province. So the idea is that I'm also a Karanga, and I had some knowledge about some of the things, but I had to learn a lot as I went into the field. So what struck me and what stayed with me was the way in which people still use traditional medical approaches and practices that they do in Zimbabwe. Still, they import them and come with them in South Africa to protect their health and also the health and well-being of their children. So merging that with what obtains in Guyana was something that was very important to look at. So pregnant migrant women particularly pay attention to physiological signs of spiritual danger, is employing a range of practices, including traditional healing and spiritual approaches to mitigate vulnerabilities. And sometimes they also use biomedicine. So what they do is they pay attention to physiological signs, and physiological signs to them is a sign of spiritual danger. Because for the Karanga migrant women, each and every illness is spiritually connected. So for them to diagnose and define a disease, it should be spiritually diagnosed. So this study that I did, tries to shed light on a multifaceted nature of health issues, also, encompassing a lot of things, including medical, cultural, and spiritual aspects among migrant communities. So this paper specifically, when I was writing it, I wanted to underscore the resilience and the resourcefulness of migrant women as they navigate intricate health landscape in pursuit of better lives for themselves and their families, not only in Guyana, but beyond Guyana. This happens not only in Guyana, but beyond Guyana. You go to Johannesburg, it happens. You go to Cape Town, it happens. Even you go beyond South Africa, in other countries, it happens. People, they go with the knowledge that they already have from their home countries, and they utilize it wherever they go. So what was my theoretical positioning in this paper? So in this study, my theoretical positioning was the issue of danger. As I mentioned earlier, that the Karanga migrant women, any illness that they encounter is spiritual for them, right? Some of the things could be physical, but they've got an underlying spiritual cause. So they framed it as a danger. So this danger, the concept of danger is a concept that I took from the field. I did not come up with the concept that I have to go in the field with the concept already. Of course, I had a concept of social networks that I wanted to explore. But once I went into the field, I realized that, oh, there's a better concept which explains the situation of migrants than the issue of social networks, which is danger. So scholars like Baxter define physical danger as any hazard, condition, or activity threatening life or health. So the discussions in this study or in this paper extends to metaphysical danger described by participants, including demons, spirits, and Mwetrina. So Mwetrina is a Shona, which means evil spiritual forces. So danger among the migrant women in Guyana is described in terms of demons, is described in terms of spirits, is described in terms of evil spiritual forces. So each and every health hazard, health shocks and stresses that they face, they are defined in terms of spiritual danger. So beliefs in such entities is common among the Karanga people, and also it shapes the cultural knowledge for survival and well-being. So in particular, pregnancy among the Karanga is regarded as a liminal phase where there is heightened vulnerabilities, and the person who is pregnant is susceptible to a lot of metaphysical forces. So a person who is pregnant among the Karanga is the one who is susceptible to all those spiritual dangers that I've mentioned earlier on. So pregnant women rely on traditional medicine and religious practice alongside biomedicine to fortify resilience against illness. So for them, what comes first is the traditional and the religious practices. These, are the ones that underpins the issue of spirituality. Of course, they do biomedicine. They can use the three concurrently, but however, they define them distinctly. They do not say that these are the same thing. These are different things, and the approaches are different. They define them differently, but they can use all of these three approaches concurrently. So this concept of danger is employed in this study to understand how the Karanga Zimbabwean migrant interpreted danger within the Tsonga cultural context. Indeed, they are the Karanga from Zimbabwe, but they are in the Tsonga cultural context in Guyana. So they try by all means to use danger to interpret, all the health shocks and stress that they face within the Tsonga cultural context. So in this paper, I recognize that, Tsonga cultural elements such as rigoni, that I'll explain later. Rigoni is called strawberry birthmark. It's defined as a disease among the Karanga. It's among the Tsonga. It's a very threatening ailment, especially in infants below the 6 months of age. So the recognition of Tsonga cultural elements such as rigoni by the Karanga migrants signifies cultural convergence within the host context of Tsonga culture in Guyana. So in other words, what I'm trying to paint is a picture in which the Karanga people, express their understanding of the host culture through the lenses of danger. So danger for them is a threat to life and health, but mainly danger is spiritual. However, it can be defined and it can be interpreted in various ways. But the point of departure is that danger is spiritual. I hope we're still together. You can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah, I think we've lost you now. And that's the danger of the internet. Yeah. Hopefully, we are going to have him back shortly. Yes, we can hear you now. We have lost you again. All right, I think let's wait a bit and see what happens. I think there's some witchcraft going on in the which is interrupting with our connectivity. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Yeah, I think we've lost him. Hopefully, he's going to be back soon. I think it's an issue of connectivity. Yes, there is. So Yeah, we had lost you a little bit, I think, for about maybe 2-3 minutes.
So which slide was I on?
Yeah, you were still on the, I think, conceptual lenses on trying to unpack the danger and how it shapes the ways in which, the migrants understood the Tsonga community in which they are in and stuff like that. I think you were almost completing that.
All right, my apologies for that. I think my network was a little bit shaky. It's intermittent because of load shedding, but I hope you can still hear me clearly.
Yes. Very clear.
So let me just try to do a quick recapture of what I was saying. So what I was discussing was that health and illness among the Shona people, the Karanga migrant women in Guyana who are living in the Tsonga culture, is explained and defined in terms of spiritual danger. So, and I was saying that danger is spiritual, and it includes demons, spirits, and Moyatrina, which means evil spiritual forces. So the belief in such entities is common among the Karanga migrant women, and it shapes the way in which they define and they define disease and illness, and also it helps them in also finding the remedy to any disease that they encounter. So basically, this is what I was saying on that. I hope I've captured enough. So what were the key findings in this paper? So the key findings, included, there were 3 things that I found that were very, very, very outstanding. So there was the issue of evil spirits or evil spiritual forces, which is Moyatrina. There was also the issues that had to do with pregnancy. For example, we have got a thing that is called a Sangen Fontanel, which is called Nova in Shona. And then also there was the issue of strawberry birthmark or strawberry hemangiomas, which is called Rigoni in Tsonga. So these were the 3 key diseases that I found that people were grappling with, and they was all connected to the issue of spiritual danger. So these are signs that are viewed as indicators of vulnerability to spiritual forces that are beyond the body. So to cope with these, the Karanga Zimbabwean migrant women, they seek assistance from traditional healers. They also use traditional medicines, and also they rely on spiritual, Christian spiritual ideas for healing. So many migrant women, they use both traditional and Christian spiritual practices simultaneously. That, in the afternoon they go to church, but in the evening, some would be using traditional medicines and some would be even using traditional healers. They recognize that the health issues encompass both medical and spiritual dimensions. So the idea of them using, traditional health modalities, Christian spiritual healing, and also using biomedicine is that they believe that, health, they encompass spiritual dimensions and also the medical dimensions. But the most important thing is they start with the spiritual dimension. They exhaust the spiritual dimension first before they go via the medical direction. So Zimbabwean migrants and the host communities, they navigate these distinctions, emphasizing the importance of both medical and spiritual aspect of health. So this study, it highlights the resilience and adaptability of the Karanga Zimbabwean migrant women in navigating healthcare landscapes for the well-being of themselves, their children, and their families. So let me now go deeper into those 3 aspects or 3 diseases or spiritual dangers that I found or that I was told by the participants. Please, I have to check if I'm still with you or you're still with me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so now I have to go on the, before I go there, I just have to reiterate that this information, the way I found it, I also had to interview men for me to have access to their wives, because it was very difficult for me to just go to women and say, tell me about this. but it was a very long process in which I started. It spanned over a long time for me to get this information. And sometimes I didn't have structured interviews that I used for me to get this information. I had to do unstructured interviews. Sometimes I had to do, participant observation, going to the clinics and, going to churches, going to different places in which migrants congregate. So from there, let me just go start unpacking the 3 indicators of spiritual danger that I found. I said there's Nova, which is the Sangen Fontanel. Then there's Maetrina, which is spiritual, evil spiritual forces. And then there's Rigoni, which is strawberry hemangiomas or a strawberry birthmark. So let me begin with Nova as an indicator of spiritual danger. So in the Shona cosmology, Nova or a Sangen Fontanel is linked to a nyoka or a snake or a ruzoka. It's an invisible snake that is believed to be residing in the body of a human being until that person dies. So Nova is framed as a disease if it is sunken, because each and every person is born with a Nova, but whenever it is sunken, then it is an indicator of spiritual danger, or danger is looming. So Nova is framed as a disease with spiritual implications, prompting reliance on traditional healthcare for treatment and protection. So among the Karanga, they strongly believe that Nova is a spiritual attack that can only be, treated using traditional healthcare and approaches. So in biomedical terms, dehydration and diarrhea are commonly cited as the primary causes and signs of a Sangen Fontanel. So a lot of migrant women were telling me that whenever their children had a Sangen Fontanel, they go to a doctor, they go to a clinic, they were told to give the child a lot of fluids. But in their own understanding, Nova was a very threatening spiritual danger that needed to be mitigated as quickly as possible. So in their understanding, they wouldn't have to go to a clinic or to any health facility with a child that has got a Sangen Fontanel. So among the Shona, sensations are, observed, and they indicate the presence of spiritual danger. So there are disturbances of the nyoka or the snake that lives in the body that causes cramps, noises, and movement in the stomach of a baby that leads to diarrhea. And diarrhea is the expelling of the impurities that are in the body. So if a child has got those cramps and noises and movements, and the fontanel is sunken, then that child has been spiritually attacked. So Nova is seen as a sign of vulnerability to spiritual dangers beyond the body. So how do now people approach Nova, or how do they treat it? So traditional healers administer herbal remedies addressing social and spiritual aspects alongside physical symptoms. So they look at all those physical symptoms that I've mentioned, that the fontanel is sunken, there are cramps in the stomach, there's diarrhea and all that. So for example, in the paper, I write of a story of a woman who's called Namatrai, who illustrates her reliance on traditional birth assistance for Nova treatment, and she was avoiding biomedical interventions. So Nova holds traditional and spiritual significance, and it prompts reliance on traditional modes of healthcare among migrant women. So in the paper, I also talk about the people who are called Mbuya Nyamukuta. Mbuya Nyamukuta is a traditional birth assistant who provides insights into traditional practices for maternal health among migrant women. So these Mbuya Nyamukutas, they play a very pivotal role among migrant women, especially in Guyana, especially when Zimbabwean migrant women are denied access to health services. They are very knowledgeable about maternal health, especially in the traditional manner, and they play a pivotal role in helping migrant women. So medicinal preparations of Nova are derived from natural sources used to treat reproductive health issues and care for newborn babies. Herbal treatment is prescribed. So in the paper, I also write about the other way in which Nova is treated. So herbal remedies are crafted from the leaves of Mvamaropa. Mvamaropa is a bloodletting tree in Zimbabwe. So leaves of that Mvamaropa are bent, and they produce ashes. So these ashes are mixed with the fat extracted from seeds of mufute or castor oil. Subsequently, the mixture of ashes and oil is applied to the affected areas on the head leading to the restoration of health. The choice of the Mvamaropa tree for its bloody shape aligns with the name and the purpose in the Karanga culture, facilitating the expulsion of impurities. So bloodletting tree signifies, a bloodletting or impurity letting in children. So it simply means bloodletting tree that is used signifies, the driving out of impurities or the expulsion of impurities in children, thereby cleansing them from the spiritual attacks of Noah. The inclusion of the fat component also conveys the idea of perfection that provides a soothing relief from pain. So fat on its own that is extracted from the castor oil, conveys the issue of perfection and soothing from the pain. Even if a small child from 0 to 6 months suffers from common stomach cramps, they are given a teaspoon of warm oil. So oil on its own, especially the castor oil, is very important among the Karanga migrant women. It's very important. It acts as a remedy. It's a medication. But especially during pregnancy, and also in postpartum period, the Shona people believe that there are restrictions that they have to be put on the diet of women. So migrant women prefer traditional healthcare due to its accessibility, affordability compared to modern medical care. But most importantly, it is embedded in the Shona cosmology. The Shona cosmology instructs people to engage with the traditional healthcare. So even though people can have access to biomedicine, still you'd find that people still, even in the present day, they still visit traditional healers. They still use traditional healthcare to treat some of the diseases because they are defined cosmologically. They are defined using the Shona culture. So rituals like keeping the newborn indoors until the umbilical cord falls off demonstrate also cultural beliefs in protecting against spiritual dangers like witchcraft. Also, I mentioned earlier on that pregnant women during the pregnancy, it's a period of vulnerability, it's a period of liminality. And also a child, when a child is born from the time of birth up until the umbilical cord falls off, it's also a liminal phase in which a child is susceptible to witchcraft. Hence, the child is kept indoors up until the umbilical cord falls off. And the umbilical cord is not thrown just like that. There are certain procedures that are followed before they throw it away. Are we still together?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Right. So let me move on to the issue of strawberry birthmark or strawberry mangiomas, which is called rigoni in Tsonga. So this one, strawberry birthmark, it indicates the presence of all spiritual danger. So rigoni is seen as an indicator of spiritual danger that is caused by evil sorcerer in the Shona culture. Migrant women consult traditional healers, herbalists, or prophets to detect and treat rigoni. So among the Shona in Zimbabwe, rigoni is not as dangerous as it is in Guiana. So the Karanga migrant women in Guyana, they learned about rigoni when they visited or when they stayed in Guyana. In Zimbabwe, rigoni is not a problem. But for some maybe who would have been in contact with the Tsonga culture, they know that is a problem. So those women that stay in Guyana now, they regard rigoni as an indicator of and presence of spiritual danger. So services of traditional healers like Mbuya Yamukuta that I've mentioned earlier are preferred due to economic viability and accessibility. So traditional healers explore spiritual causes of illness in addition to physical symptoms, emphasizing the importance of spiritual understanding for effective treatment. So for those who don't know, what is rigoni? Rigoni, this is the situation where a child is born with pink veins around the neck and at the back of the head. So when the child is born with those pinkish or reddish veins, it's a spiritual, it's an indicator of the presence of rigoni, which is also an indicator of the presence of spiritual danger among the Tsonga and also among the Karanga migrant women who are within the Tsonga community. So the traditional healers explore spiritual causes in addition to physical symptoms. And among the Shona, there is also a proverb which is called Panechariurayasisarifenemepo, which simply means that it cannot just be wind. Something must have killed the owl. So in interpreting this proverb in this study, it highlights the belief that in each and every disease, there's an underlying spiritual cause. Or it highlights the belief in underlying spiritual causes of illness beyond visible symptoms. That, you know, it cannot just be a disease. There is a cause. There is an underlying spiritual cause of the disease. It cannot just happen just like that. So what happens when they treat rigoni? So to treat rigoni, some small incisions around the neck and at the back of the head are used as a form of immunization against rigoni. So these are used to strengthen treatments, to strengthen the baby. Strengthened treatments are administered to those small incisions using traditional medicine, specific herbs and animal products to ward off evil influences. So infants are exposed to traditional herbal smoke to prevent malevolent influences of sorcery and contribute to ritualistic protection against illnesses and malevolent forces. So the practice aims to immunize infants against rigoni, with the smoke believed to aid in healing without harm to the infants. So the infant is exposed to smoke, that is to herbal smoke. So the smoke is a mixture of herbs that are burnt, and the smoke that oozes out of those herbs is used as immunization. And it is believed that it's not harmful to children because it is specifically for immunizing them against rigoni. So rigoni management serves not only to address physical symptoms, but also to safeguard against spiritual dangers and uphold cultural rituals for infant protection. So this process of treating rigoni is not only about treatment, but it's a double dose. It's a treatment and immunization against the future, you know, spiritual attacks and spiritual dangers. So let me move on to the spiritual forces that I talked about, or as an indicator of spiritual danger. So apart from the issue of Nova and rigoni, also another thing that, you know, migrant women are afraid of is the issue of or evil spirits. Migrant women tend to ethnomedicine for diseases like Nova, but spiritual risks like play a crucial role in their healthy decisions. So in traditional culture, Mwechi refers to the manifestation of evil spirits that regulate the life, health, and well-being of each individual. So scholars such as Nemachena, they believe that spiritual forces are intrinsic to the individual's existence and shapes their lives profoundly. So the fear of Mwechi prompts migrant women to seek guidance from Pentecostal churches, which claim to detect and exorcise spirits. So as I mentioned earlier on, for Noah, you know, people, they seek traditional health services. For rigoni, they seek traditional health services. But for Trina, now they seek religious approaches in form of Pentecostal churches. So some migrant women attend church services only when facing spiritual or physical threats, relying on traditional healers or biomedicine during the week. So some people will just go to church to seek spiritual and physical health, but most of the time they rely on traditional healers and also rely traditional medicine and biomedicine during the week. So the diversity of healthcare modes against illness, it reflects the everyday life modes and engagement and diverse ways of sensing danger among the Karanga migrant women. So you'd find that each and every illness has got its own approach. So the way they define, detect, and diagnose a disease is also going to determine the way they are going to treat and approach that disease. So understanding Trina provides insights into how migrant women navigate healthy decisions, balancing spiritual and physical well-being. So churches in Guyana, they provide crucial health support, fostering community bonds and offering spiritual protection. So most of the churches are Pentecostal churches that have got prophets. These prophets, they claim that they can offer spiritual protection to the congregants. So at the end of the day, most of these spiritual protections are free of charge. So, most migrants tend to flock to those churches in search of what? Of spiritual protection. So migrant women are drawn to Pentecostal churches due to their claims of identifying and expelling evil spirits aligning with the Shona beliefs in evil spiritual forces. So they can also double the issue here, double the problem and double the treatment in the way that, if a child is suffering from Noah, they can still take that child to a traditional healer, and after that, they can take the child to the church for further protection. If a child is suffering from Rigoni, they take that child to a traditional healer or herbalist, but further, they take that child to church for spiritual cleansing. And also, they can also engage biomedicine in some instances. So there was one church which is called the Congress Ministries that offer free and accessible spiritual healing, which is beneficial for physical, emotional, and spiritual issues. Also, it's not about the spiritual healing part, but the issue of congregating as a family, supporting one another. That emotional support that they get into churches is very important also for their health and their well-being. Remember, migrants are people who are living beyond their home borders. Sometimes they've got a lot of shocks and stresses. So for them, attending churches, bonding, linking, and bridging, and congregating and communing with fellow members of humanity is one way of them distressing. It's one of them dealing with a lot of stresses that they face in South Africa, especially during the times of xenophobia. So migrant women describe spiritual healing through gestures like laying of hands, prayers, stimulating divine intervention for physical and spiritual healing. So some believe that even when you are physically suffering from something, if they pray for you, you can be healed. These are some of the things that were coming out from the field. So example for healing included the issue of sanguine recovery from infants, which highlight the significance of church-provided spiritual healing in offsetting health threats. So as I mentioned, churches enable intermingling of South African and Zimbabwean women, and also different nationalities they can meet in churches, which can foster social and spiritual cohesion, and also spiritual networks that decrease vulnerability and that promote conviviality. So these church networks, they facilitate access also to biomedicine, to biomedical health services. So for example, when one is denied or one migrant is denied access to health services in the clinic, they go to church, they meet some of the healthcare practitioners who are attending the same church. They tend to form formidable connections, which in turn would allow these migrants to have access to biomedicine in a different register. For example, in a friendly register rather than a professional register, which is very important. So church are not only for spiritual healing, but also they facilitate access to important networks that are very important for healing and well-being. Moving on, I think after these three indicators of spiritual danger, there was an issue of choice dilemma of where people would want to go, right? Some were expressing reservations against traditional medicine, and some expressing reservations against spiritual healing. So despite the concurrent use of traditional medicine, I hope you can still hear me.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So despite the concurrent use of traditional medicine, religious approaches, and biomedicine among Zimbabwean migrant women in Guyana, these options are not always perceived as equivalent or interchangeable. The choice of a healing modality is always influenced or instructed by the religious or cultural background of an individual, which reflects similar dynamics in Zimbabwean societies. For example, in Zimbabwe, there are certain apostolic churches, such as the Joan Marange, that have triggered disputes due to their restriction on seeking medical consultation or participating in services conducted by alternative religious institutions. So the apostolic churches, they previously prohibited seeking medical care, improved accessibility and availability of health services. And as a result, because they think or they thought that the biomedicine that is being used in hospitals is made from the herbs, and the herbs on them, they are demonic. The herbs are associated with dark spirits. So people should not be associated with medicine, whether it is medicine from the hospital, clinic, or wherever. it is made from herbs and the herbs are not clean. So some individuals, particularly Christians, may avoid traditional medicine due to concerns about perceived risks and adherence to religious beliefs, while others also express reservations about the lack of scientific testing and established dosages. So the diversity of health modalities and modes of engagements highlight the value of cultural and religious diversity and the dynamic nature of human experience in navigating health threats. So what are the key ideas that I was discussing in this paper? The key ideas I was discussing in this paper is the interplay, number one, the interplay of culture, tradition, and religion. So this paper highlights the complex relationship between these factors in addressing health threats, especially in the context of migration. Number two, the utilization of traditional and spiritual practices. So migrant women employ a blend of traditional wisdom and faith-based practices to mitigate health dangers. They see any problem in using all the three or all the two concurrently. Number three, there's also significance of physiological science. So in this paper, I discussed about the interpretation of physiological science, such as evil spiritual forces, Noah, and Rigoni, as indicators of vulnerability to spiritual forces that are even beyond the body. Number four, I talk about the influence of migratory status, that migration on its own can influence the choice of healthcare modality and can often lead to people to rely on a certain practice, be it traditional or medicinal or biomedical or religious. Number five, I also spoke in the paper, I speak of cultural convergence and cultural interpretation. So I try to demonstrate the fusion of belief systems that results in novel cultural interpretation of danger. For example, the Karanga migrant women in Zimbabwe have got their way of interpreting danger. But when they went to Guyana, or when they come to Guyana, they find that there is Rigon, which is also another indicator of spiritual danger. The way they interpret it using the Karanga lenses and also within the Tonga context is very important. And it highlights the importance of recognizing and having valuing diverse healthcare approaches. Then the sixth thing was the holistic perspective of health. So this paper challenges the conventional understanding of medicine and spirituality as separate domains. Usually, when people are studying, medicine and spirituality, they tend to separate the two. But according to the Karanga women, these two things cannot be separated. You have to start spiritually first, then you finish off with medicine. So these are not separate domains, but rather they should be an interconnected nature of treating these two. So I emphasize the interconnectedness of physical, emotional, and the spiritual aspects of health. Then the seventh and last is the call for inclusive healthcare system. So in this paper, I urge the need for healthcare systems to respect and accommodate diverse belief systems and practices, advocating for a holistic approach to healthcare that embraces cultural traditions. Rather, let's not downplay the cultural traditions, but rather try to understand them. Try to go into the space of cultural traditions, understand how they define a disease and also how they interpret treatment. That could always help a lot of people. Thank you very much. Over to you, Professor Gugurumi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tamuka, for that interesting presentation. So I think for now, let me open up to questions and comments from the students first, and then we can open it up to other attendees. So I don't know online, do we have any questions, any comments online, maybe before I think we've got about 20 people also in the house, and at some point we had 20 online, which is a very good number, I think, for a start. So I don't know who would want to start in terms of questions. Yeah, in the class. Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir, how are you?
Hello.
I do.
Yeah, please, you can go ahead with your question.
I just wanted to say this was an interesting presentation. It's a very good presentation. I have a question here, so I wanted to know what are the key findings in your research?
All right. I don't know if I have to take one question at a time or 3 questions at a time.
Yeah, no, I think we can take maybe 3 or 4 so that we save time. I think we can just in a line because they'd prepared a question, so we can just do 4 in a line, then we do the other 4. So we can have the next one, and then you respond to maybe 4 or 3 questions. Yeah. So you can.
I'll answer my first question was I wanted to please your problem statement. What was the plan that you wanted to be? And then my second question is, how did your understanding of epistemology, the theory of knowledge, and ontology, the theory of influence your study?
Okay, I don't know if you heard that.
Can you try to?
Yeah, maybe if you can speak up a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, I said my first question was your problem statement. Like, what was the gap that you were trying to see? Like, I wanted to understand your problem statement. And then my second question was how did your understanding of epistemology, the theory of knowledge, and ontology, the theory of reality, influence your research?
Okay, I got that. So one last question.
Yeah, I think we can take 2. Okay, we have one online. Yes, you can go ahead online. There's one hand online. You can unmute and ask your question, and then we take one from here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tamuka, for that good presentation. Methodologically, how did you present yourself, as a man interviewing most probably other people's wife? I know it might be a taboo subject. How did you exercise cultural sensitivity, carrying out your data collection?
Okay.
Right. Thank you very much. I think we can have one more, and then you will just respond to. So can we have the next person?
Can I first?
Yeah.
Because I think my question is almost similar to the one that was asked.
Yes, you can go ahead.
So my question is, since we are talking about, I guess it's all about women and how they navigate children, whatnot. So my question is, was it easy when you was interviewing them? We have to bear in mind that he is a man, and I feel like some of this information traditionally, men ain't supposed to know about certain things. So I want to know, was it easy for him to get this kind of information from the women that he was asking during the interviews? Because I feel like I can relate a little bit with the culture.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think you can take those ones, and then we'll have the next round of questions, maybe the last, I think.
All right. Thank you very much for these key questions. Very interesting questions indeed. So the first question was, what are the key findings in your research? So as I mentioned, as I was starting, that this was a master's thesis, and I plucked this paper particularly as a chapter out of my thesis. So, but in this paper, my key findings were that, you know, there are two things that happen. Migrant women are denied access to health services. Hence, they tend to spiritual and traditional approaches to dealing with the health and lack of health. And also their migratory status. Just by being a Zimbabwean, your culture can instruct you to go and use traditional approaches to healing. So the key findings were that, you know, they are mainly three important spiritual dangers that migrant women face in Guyana, which are the issue of Sangen Fontanel. They face it in Zimbabwe, but also it's pronounced in Guyana. Then there was a new thing that they had to face, which was called Rigoni. And the last thing, also the issue of Moyawe Trina, or evil spiritual forces that they already faced. But the issue, the main issue was how they were dealing with this. So initially, when I went to the field, I just wanted to find about their problems. What were the challenges that they were facing in accessing health services? But later, when I was rewriting my thesis after gathering my findings, I realized that my research was more about how they deal with the challenges rather than the challenges themselves. Of course, the challenges are important, but the issue was about how they deal with the health challenges that they face in the face of being denied access to health services. So the second question about the problem statement, again, it is linked to what I've said. The problem statement is I wanted to find out about, you know, the challenges that migrant women were facing. So the problem was that they, you know, what are the challenges that they face, or what are their experiences in accessing health services? And, you know, I thought my research was mostly going to be about the challenges, but later it was all about, you know, the subsequent coping and adaptive strategies that they improvise when they are denied access to health services. So at the end of the day, I think you need to be flexible in research to understand that you can plan something in your proposal, but it's not always the one thing that is going to come up in the field. It's a little bit different. I think it also ties to the third question, which was about the theory and which was talking about the issue of ontology. Of course, in the field, I went there, you know, in my proposal, I proposed to use the theory of social networking to understand how people were dealing with the challenges that they were facing in Guyana. But the concept of danger came out from the field. So I had to take the concept of danger, problematize it, and try to understand danger from the lenses of the Tsonga and from the lenses of the Karanga. In my initial proposal, I was just going to focus on Zimbabwean migrant women, who were especially pregnant women. But at the end of the day, I ended up, you know, even speaking with the Tsonga women. Yeah, so it's the theory that came about, the conceptual framework of danger came as a result of, you know, the conversations and the data that I found from the field. So you just need to be flexible enough to understand that things can change whenever you go to the field. You know, it's not even a problem, it's not a crime. You know, you just have to be flexible, allow, you know, things to happen. So the third question is also intertwined with the fifth question. The fourth question, I mean, is intertwined with the fifth question, where I'm being asked about the issue of methodology. I don't think it's about methodology per se, but I think it's about ethics, if I'm not mistaken, Professor Gugurume. You know, when I went to the field, it was not my first time to go to Guyana. I was blessed enough to have worked for the Treatment Action Campaign, for those who know it. So Treatment Action Campaign was based in Tsanin, and then when I went there for internship, they moved me to Guyana. So during my time as an intern, this is where I did some of my research, you know, through the organization, through the outreach programs. I know, you know, some of those who come from Limpopo, they know the Imbizos. They do something like the Imbizo. They do outreach programs. So in those outreach programs, I was creating networks that were very helpful during my research. So what I did is I had created networks, and also having lived there and having used the organization, it was easy for me because I had created rapport with some of the potential participants. So of course there are also taboos that are placed, in knowing other things, especially things that had to do with the maternity, with maternity. But however, I had to employ female research assistants. So coupled with me having created networks before going to the field for my master's research, I also employed research assistants who were female. This was made it easy for me, to create rapport with other participants. And as I mentioned earlier on when I was presenting, I also had to create rapport with some of the men in the community, for me to get access. Sometimes I would interview both of them, a man and a woman, a father and a mother, husband and wife. I had to do all that. So it was not a structured way of doing research. I had to adapt to what was obtaining in the field and to be very flexible. I think my PhD supervisor, Francis Nyamjo, wants to call it nimble-footedness. So I had to be nimble-footed enough for me to get and gather as much data as I could within the confines of the taboos and the rules that apply in the Tsonga culture and also in the Karanga culture. I hope I've tried to answer the questions as succinct as I could.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. I think maybe we can take the last round if there are any that are different from what has been asked already. If you have any more additional questions at this side. Yes, go ahead.
Good afternoon, Doc. My question is based on, because you are doing research on marginalized group of society from Zimbabwe. I just want to know whether they resorted to use these strategies of healing voluntarily, or they were forced by the situation in which they were presented under. That's what I just want to know from your own perspective. How do you take this one? Do you take it that it is due to their cosmology, of cultural cosmology, or is because of desperation? And the other one is, no, it's not a comment. It's not a question. It's just a comment. I think your paper contributes to the involvement of treatment, that we need to acknowledge that multiple ways of treating, they are acceptable in our societies. Because I know some of the times when a person goes to a traditional healer, they get a taboo that they are taking as witches. So I think this paper contributes a lot to interconnected treatment or healing. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, I see Mr. John online. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Thank you very much, Doc, for this wonderful presentation. But now, Doc, I was just a little bit interested in finding out perhaps that is there maybe any scientific evidence or report or even a medical report which maybe speaks to the issue of maybe problems from the male side, which contributes now to any to which contributes to maybe women resorting now to traditional medicine and things like that. Because what I'm worried about, I don't know, maybe because I have connection had been a problem. Maybe you did touch it that because my concern now is there perhaps, or maybe do you have any evidence which says maybe there's nothing wrong with the female, with the organic or with the reproductive system of men, which contributes to maybe ill health or not, or poor health of children, instead of now solely redirecting now the issues of health to traditional medicines. That is what I want the Doc just to clear for me. I don't know, did you capture it correctly, Doc?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any maybe last one. Yeah. Yeah, you got it.
Thank you so much, Doc. I don't know but based on the limitations you said last time we met on the number of questions, I don't know, is it allowed to pose more than two?
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. If you have more than two, if you have more than two, yeah, I know Doc can respond quickly so that we don't hold people for long.
The first question is on the method. I just want to find out the influence behind the focus group discussions. That approach, what really influenced that? Why you chose the focus groups instead of other methods that are available there? And then the second question is, what percentage of what were the percentages in the focus group of the migrants who are in South Africa legally and illegally? So I just want to find out the balances of illegal and legal migrants in those focus groups. And another question would be, isn't it the economic status of migrants playing a huge influence in terms of decisions to go to the hospitals or the traditional healers? You know, and then lastly will be comments, Doc, particularly on the findings, the last chapter on the conclusions. I genuinely feel that there should have been more on the influence of culture on migrants' choices. Particularly the Garanga, there should have been at least an elaborate discussion on the influence on culture on people making decisions to go for the available healthcare options. And another one, a contribution from my side would be the medical xenophobia. And I see the appearance also of xenophobia in the article. I think in the paper, I didn't see from my side the convincing argument that xenophobia and medical xenophobia contributes significantly towards the migrants' choices when it comes to healthcare. I'm saying this because I saw only the utterances of the minister, and I didn't see any, further elaborate convincing arguments that really the choices of migrants in Guyana are influenced heavily by medical xenophobia and xenophobic attitudes towards migrants. And I'm saying this because Guyana, like any gateway or exit or entry nodes in South Africa, it's composed of a lot of people from outside South Africa. And one will assume that even the healthcare systems in Guyana is serviced by people who are not from South Africa. So that's really my thoughts on the discussion on medical xenophobia and xenophobia. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Yeah, you have quite a mouthful there. I think a number of comments and questions. You can just pick on the ones that you think you want to address. I think that should be the last round.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think these are very important and interesting questions. I'll try to be as quick as I can so that I don't delay people from leaving. So the first question was about how marginalized women do they use traditional medicine voluntarily, or they are forced? So the issue is not about them being forced. So sometimes it's about them being instructed by the culture. For example, in the Shona culture, you know, there are things that I didn't write because of limitations, but in my thesis, I wrote those things. Whenever they are preparing for the child to come, there are a lot of herbs that are given to a woman to ingest. There are a lot of things that a woman is, and even the diet, I spoke about the diet of a pregnant woman is strictly monitored, but in the cultural lenses, so that they prepare the path for the child that is coming. So in other words, in one way, migrant women are not forced to take traditional medicine, rather they are instructed by their culture, which I was referring to as cosmology. But also the second thing is about them being denied access to health services. As I said, each and every illness is defined differently using the cultural lenses. For example, Noah, they don't need necessarily to go to the hospital, rather they go via the traditional way. Whenever they are facing spiritual trainer, they don't necessarily have to go to the hospital, but they rather go to church. When they face the issue of rigoni, they look for a herbalist or they look for a traditional healer. So in other words, their choice is instructed by the way they detect and diagnose a disease, but also it is also instructed by them being denied access to health services. So at the end of the day, if one is denied access, so I think it's a bit of both. Then there was a question about the medical report that speaks to the problems from the male side, you know, that force women to rely on traditional medicine. Again, I think it's linked to the response that I gave earlier, that sometimes I think the issues that are documented about gender-based violence, when women are abused, you know, what do they do? Sometimes, you know, one is abused and denied. For example, you are beaten by a husband as a migrant woman. You are not allowed to go to the hospital because once you go to the hospital, they'll need a police report. That would lead to your husband being arrested and also being deported. So those issues, I face them in the field where women would rather use traditional medicine. But something that has been documented for now, I think it's mainly it's gender-based violence, and there's nothing that has been specifically focusing on traditional medicine. Rather, it has been focusing on biomedicine. But I hope it's one area of trying to look at these issues. Then I go to the questions of methods. So the influence of focus group discussions. My focus group discussions were not structured and they were not formally convened. What I would do is I would go to churches, right? Soon after church, you know that people, they congregate outside the church in groups. So I would take that opportunity to speak to people about my research rather than trying to arrange a focus group discussion, because remember, migrants, they are in South Africa to look for better and improved life chances. So each and every time you see them, they are doing something to get money. So the only time you would get to speak to them is if you go to a saloon, you go to parties, right? End of year parties, you go to churches. I'll try to find areas in which they congregate in numbers. Then I'll try to speak to them in that manner. I wouldn't necessarily convene a focus group discussion in a structured manner, because I tried that, it didn't work, because you'd find that only 2 people are free on Monday. The ones that are free on Monday, Tuesday, they are not available. Then you'd find that you won't end up having a focus group discussion. So for those who know Guyana, I think there's a place called Dzumeri. In Dzumeri, there's a place which is called Four-Way. They are doing the chisanyama, where they are buying chicken and stuff. So normally during, I think around this time, around 5, you know, people would come to that place, you know, they would want to buy the food and to buy a lot of things. I would take that opportunity to speak to people. So I wouldn't necessarily convene a structured focus group discussion. Rather, it was what I coined an impromptu focus group discussion. So the percentage of migrants who are legal in South Africa in those, so my focus was not about the legality or illegality of these migrants, but what I was focusing on was the challenges and the subsequent strategies that they the health choices and stress that they face in South Africa. So I did not focus on the legality or illegality because it had no basis, or it had no influence at all on what I was looking for. Of course, it had influence on them being denied access to health services. But you would see, even if somebody is, let's say, has got a passport or is legal in South Africa, they can still be denied healthcare services. For example, myself, I've been denied healthcare service several times, but I do have a student visa. I had my passport, my papers were in order, but at the end of the day, I was denied several times. And sometimes I would see that even if somebody's got documents, they can be prescribed unnecessary C-sections. I have a paper that I wrote about how migrant women are prescribed C-sections as a way of scaring them away. Because, for example, you would find that a person gives birth normally, the first birth normally, then the second birth they are prescribed a C-section without proper standard medical procedures and without proper reasoning or without a proper reason for doing that. So at the end of the day, the being legal or illegal was not the basis of my research, but it's something that is important as well. I can't dispute that. And then on that issue, there was also the issue of economic status that influenced the healthcare modality of migrants. This does not only apply to migrants. At the end of the day, it applies to a lot of people, because you find that sometimes you want to have an operation that is very expensive, and some of the hospitals cannot do it, public hospitals. At the end of the day, if you do not have enough money, then you might not end up having that operation. I was running away from the economic status of migrants because I never wanted to be trapped in the pitfall of other scholars who were talking about, or who were defining migrants as poor, as always repatriating, as people who are living in the margins. That's not always the case. You'd find that there are migrants who are also owning properties, migrants who are owning businesses, migrants who are doing well. So economic status, of course, it can influence, but it cannot be the sole reason for them choosing a healthcare modality. There are a lot of issues like culture, as I've mentioned earlier on. The issue of comment on culture, how it influences people's choices of healthcare, I've touched on it. Then the issue of medical xenophobia, how it contributes towards migrants' health choices. As I mentioned earlier on, I think this is an area that I exhausted in my thesis. So in this particular paper, I was not much more worried about the medical xenophobia because I had established it. I've got maybe 2 or 3 other papers that I wrote about medical xenophobia. And the likes of Krashi and Tawadzera, they've exhausted about medical xenophobia. But now we can't continue, like recycling the same information. But what I wanted to do is, yes, we have got medical xenophobia, it's there. And then now what? So how do now migrants respond and react to medical xenophobia? If you see in this paper, that was my main worry. That's why I mentioned medical xenophobia in passing. That my main worry is now people have established that this medical xenophobia, they are facing a lot of challenges. How now do they respond and react to this? So each and every spiritual danger has got its treatment. As I said, people go to traditional healers, Regoni. People go to herbalists. If spiritual forces, they go to church. If they've got other issues, they also go to pharmacies, and sometimes they get medication from the hospitals through friendly registers via the church. So the issue of medical xenophobia is important, but in this case, I was much more concerned about how now the subsequent coping strategies, subsequent adaptive strategies that migrant women, create in order to deal with the existential challenges that they face in Guyana. I hope I have answered the question. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tamuka, for your interesting presentation. We really learned a lot. And thank you everyone who attended today's session. And next week we have another exciting one on Tuesday, and I hope everyone is also going to join us. So thank you very much, Dr. Tamuka, for sharing your insights and for engaging us today. enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you everyone for joining.
Okay, so we have come to the end of today's session, and we are going to reconvene another session next week, Tuesday, which is also going to be very interesting, like today's session. So everyone online, enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you again for attending today's session. Okay, so thank you guys for attending. Next week we are going to be having another one, and we'll try to be on time so that we don't eat into your time. So yeah, thank you very much for attending. You can also enjoy the rest. Yeah, and then my class, I think we can have let's say 10 minutes break to refresh and then get started. That's 10 minutes. 10 minutes and then get started.
How's every station there?
No, I was lost.
Is that all right?
I don't know.
What's it?
And you said the last paper was yesterday, but.
And then I was supposed to ask like, most of the papers.
What is his status? What paper is that?
Oh, yes, you say you're a kid boy, playing new card.
That's why.
Yes, what's your last system?
I was going to pick up move along.
No, man.
Yeah.
That's what she said on the 15th.
Trenches.
Yes.
Reason.
I don't even know about it.
You know the health. My.
There's
No,
money.
it's.
But
What's that? It's very sweet.
it was promising. It was promising. No, I'm going to make until it's new. No, thank you, great. Even about grades.
Okay, another story.
Literally nothing. It's been a long time.
Right?
When you sell English.
Right?
When you sell English.
Another story.
12. Yeah. That's it.
How far is it from here?
I have to work for you. I found it. Let's
Is that just 20 minutes away?
The day I moved here, the next day. Yeah, the.
He's the fun.
That side, traffic from
And they keep telling each other that everything they're doing is
And we were talking so Facebook. Hey, oh, what a good show. How many is
it's back home. But what we can ask
That's not.
And what's paradigm people that excited by email?
Now I'm so lost in this one. I'm so lost.
Like actually, the only question is if people got your ever got.
What one said?
I love the cooking. It's not.
It's enough.
Yeah. Additional one. Not like questions are from the reflection.
Last time maybe there was some talk about the timeline is something you all name or I'm like, oh, I'm just here every day like
You find new things every day. So by calculating your accommodation. Who's that?
I live in the trenches.
There's
Not
still.
foundation, but it's in the trenches. You know the Volkswagen Special? The amount of walking I've done, I know this.
I know. There's some place where we're living was, but it's sharing. It's not the same. It's a sharing.
What if
There is a in there.
what if that person is a problem?
You have to buy data.
Yo,
Hi.
here I'm on survival mode. Hey.
It's not an option. I think that was dismissed. I enjoyed it. No, it's not there.
You didn't send me that message.
Then you check the receipt. You find it. Whatever.
And most of the time offline. Most of the time offline. He wasn't that later.
Oh.
I don't what's up.
Right? Who called?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Let's make a reflection. I can only go to one movie. Yes.
reflections for of what? No, I saw that whole 3 pages thing.
Those two readings that he sent. I'm buying it. He knows he's supposed to buy it. That means he's keeping love or nothing. But I see the question. But I love the confidence. Who's that one?
I love your eyes.